Hey folks, before I start all this, I am putting this into a Substack. So if you're watching this on my Redneck Thinker, whether it's Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at, there's going to be a link to my Substack so you can go there and read the article. So let's get into this. Few people have heard the name Marta Velázquez, but she is one of the most important assets for the Cuban intelligence services against the U.S., with them codenaming her Barbara. She was a liberal American that was born into a family that was privileged, but she hated freedom and the nation she was a citizen of. So, probably during a very privileged education at an Ivy League school, she became a recruiter and spy for Cuba. She recruited at least one asset who is considered the most damaging one against the U.S., Anna Montez. She was trained how to spy alongside Montez, then spent decades doing so before having to go on the run. Velázquez got to live a life many do not have access to, yet she turned away from freedom because of how she was taught by family and the education system. Despite proof of it being failed, she fell in love with the ideals of Karl Marx. Studying her life is one of the ways to see how Cubans have infiltrated the U.S. government while also showing the dangers of our current education system. Ideology aside, the fact she was allowed to hold important positions in the government with her background shows that background checks were a joke and did more damage than good. Also, hit like and subscribe if you like this sort of thing. So let's get into this.
Howdy, y'all. This is Paul, the Redneck Thinker. What we have here is a channel to communicate. I want you folks to be thinking by the time you leave my videos. Why? Because I'm tired of people talking via what other people tell them to think. So, watch my video and enjoy the chance to think for yourself.
Just to give you context, most of this is a whole lot from some books and other research. So, Marta Velázquez was born in Puerto Rico in 1957, with her father, Miguel Velázquez Rivera, being first a lawyer, then a judge. He was a strong advocate for Puerto Rico becoming independent from the U.S., which many liberals do in the territory. The two were close. She would eventually get accepted to Princeton in 1975, where she would major in political science and Latin American studies while becoming a protester against apartheid. She also helped organize the festival celebrating Latinos with the group Ascion Puerto Ricana, a group which constantly declared independence and socialism as the only political alternative for Puerto Rico. At this festival, she would be quoted to say that we are all part of oppressed nationalities throughout the world. Here at the university, which is very conservative and white male oriented, if we can put together a performance as successful as this one, it's almost unbelievable. By the way, if you actually research Princeton at the time, at no point does the Ivy League school come across as conservative from an educator standpoint or a student one. Yes, the board was, not anyone else. It's also rich considering her family in Puerto Rico for her to consider herself oppressed in any manner. Her thesis to graduate from Princeton was named Race Relations in Cuba, Past and New Developments. In this paper, she described herself as the descendant of an African woman who lived on a sugar plantation in Puerto Rico. How this had any bearing on a paper about Cuba is anyone's guess. She did get allowed to travel to Cuba with several Princeton students to research her paper. From what many Cubans say about their home nation, her thesis topic is one of the few areas where there are no issues on the island. In the paper, she argues that Fidel Castro wiped away all racism and inequality in Cuba when he took power in 1959. She argued it, yet people from Cuba say different. After graduating from Princeton in 1979, she got accepted to Georgetown Law School, where she went further into Marxist ideology. She also got the prestigious job as managing editor and writer for the Georgetown Law Weekly. Such an oppressed life. She would graduate in 1982, but not without making sure to hit all the liberal check marks while there. She then got accepted into another prestigious academic program, the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. This is a school that has had a Cuban spy teaching there, with many other professors being extreme Marxist as well. As a matter of fact, Velázquez went to school as Walter Kendall Myers taught there, a man who that would later, with his wife, be busted for spying on the U.S. for Cuba. Velázquez would befriend another student who would cause her to go into a very posh exile from America. This woman was Ana Montez, the woman Velázquez recruited into spying, trained alongside, and would spy for Cuba as she worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, from 1985 to 2001. This ideological spy who would eventually get caught and named Velázquez as a recruiter, friend, and fellow trainee. It is not known when Velázquez got recruited to serve Castro, but it was sometime in 1983 while attending SAIS, according to the indictment. She has never granted an interview, so we only know acquaintances and federal investigate and only know what acquaintances and the federal investigation has revealed. It is well known that U.S. academia is a rich recruiting ground for Cuba, as the teachers and students groups brainwash students into believing in Marxism. This would be where Velázquez would hunt her prey, which shows with her ability to stay in school so long how not oppressed she really was. One of her ends with Montez would be their shared wish for Puerto Rico to become the next Cuba. Montez and Velázquez started their friendship in 1984, with people stating they were inseparable. This was a busy time for Marta Velázquez. She was dating Horace Jennings, a staffer for the Democrat Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen from Texas. That's a long time ago. Democrat being a senator from Texas. And helping leftist professor Piero Glycines with the book The Guatemalan Revolution and the United States, 1944 to 1954. Glycines was known to be so Marxist that Castro granted him the lone chance of research through the Cuban archives years later. Unlike what would become known about the life of Montez, it seems that Velázquez was quite adept at keeping her social life active while also improving her standing as a Marxist. The initial recruitment of Montez was under the guise of helping the people of Nicaragua, but Montez quickly figured out the real angle. When both graduated from SAIS, Montez went on a trip to Argentina while Velázquez was able to get a job with the Federal Department of Transportation, where she worked from 84 to 89. After the two were both in Washington, D.C. again in the winter of 1984, Velázquez worked to make sure she had plenty of blackmail material on Montez in case this ideological recruit decided to change sides. In March 1985, the two women would make a trip to Madrid, Spain, where the Director of General Intelligence, DGI, Cuba's primary intelligence service, would pick them up and get them to Cuba. They would have a mixture of island fun and hardcore training to make them the perfect spies for Castro. They were trained in how to unencrypt messages from shortwave number stations. If you do not know what that is, it can be a fun research project. How to spot a tail, how to fool a polygraph, and other tricks spies needed. They were then whisked back to Europe where they made sure to take the right pictures to make it look like they were there the entire time. It was after this trip that Montez started looking for a new governmental position, which ended up being an analyst at the DIA. Velázquez would assist her in getting this job, all the while keeping up appearances that they were the best of friends. Velázquez would even be a guest at the wedding of the sister of Montez. In 1988, though, the two had a theatrical falling out to protect each other in case either were caught. There were only a few instances where they would ever come in public contact again. Velázquez would eventually get hired by the former CIA front agency USAID in 1989, the titular aid agency that has worked as a front for espionage around the world, where she had done an internship while at SAIS. It is ironic that this was the agency that Velázquez would spend the most time with. From 1979 to 1990, Washington, D.C. would be her home. In 1990, she would be sent to the U.S. Embassy in Managua, Nicaragua. She would be there when Montez was sent by the U.S. government to brief the newly elected Nicaraguan president Violeta Chamorro on several topics. There's no information if two spies talked. The DOJ indictment lists that in 1992, Velázquez communicated with the Cuban handlers and would travel to Panama to meet them later that year. The meeting was a way to make sure she answered all questions to them in a secure environment. It is also known she was still in contact with their handlers in 1996 per the indictment, as she used them as a way to communicate to Montez that she was pregnant and for other purposes. She also received software to make encryption easier. It is at this time that Velázquez met Anders Kabil, a Swedish diplomat. They would end up being married in 1996 in Puerto Rico. Her work in Managua from 90 to 94, and then to the U.S. aid headquarters in D.C. She would give birth to two children, then moved to Sweden for a short while in 1999. In 2000, she would get assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City while her husband got an assignment at the Swedish Embassy there. It was there that she found out about Montez being arrested and would flee in 2002. The FBI had known her name, but had moved too slow to grab her. Now, there, I do have the complete press release that was given by the Department of Justice that has some of this information in my Substack article. So if you want to read that, you can. Uh, Velázquez would flee to Sweden and be granted citizenship, which would allow her to evade her day in court. She was able to travel to a couple of nations because they consider what she did a political matter, not a crime. She would become a teacher, teaching various topics at higher end schools in Sweden and Austria, where her husband had been for a short while. While she did have to miss her father's funeral, she lived in an expensive home as a main residence in Sweden, while also having a nice home as somewhere to vacation. It will never be known why the FBI did not move quicker on her when the FBI employee's sister of Ana Montez alerted them to who Velázquez was. She has gotten the chance to live in luxury as in a nation that protected her identity in the control of the media. So much for being oppressed. So the primary backbone of all of this came from the book Codename Blue Wren. There's also the indictment that I got a lot of this information from, and from several news articles, but some of this is listed in the Substack. I know that that was a lot of information, but people need to be made aware of how these Marxists operate in this country. You think about this for a second. Here's a woman that lived a very privileged life, exceedingly privileged life. Yet she considered herself oppressed. This is the brainwashing of modern within modern education. these same groups that brainwashed her are still in power to this day. They just have different names and they have fairly the same goals. You should pay attention to what's going on when you send kids to school nowadays because they are creating a culture that is very anti-freedom. They want you to be enslaved. That is their main goal. That is what Marxism's all about, is enslaving you to having a few masters. But that's what liberalism has always been. So, I hope you enjoyed all that. Like I said before, hit like and subscribe. This has been Paul, the Redneck Thinker. Y'all have a good day now. Bye. So, folks, that's the story that I wanted to bring you on this video. And I just wanted to say thank you again for coming by. Well, hit like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff if you don't mind. Help me out. So, y'all have a good day now. Bye.